It's the dream of every cricketer, the ultimate glory. Few manage to keep their date with destiny. But for many, it's been heartbreaks and a cross to bear. The Holy Grail is here in India. I'm Rupha Ramani, and Firstpost brings you the ringside view. We bring you the Cup of Dreams. Cricket World Cup coverage like never before.
The champion!
It's over!
He's done it again! Unbelievable!
Oh, straight into the roof of the net.
Nice one.
Straight down the middle. So a good performance from both teams.
Hi, this is Rupha Ramani and you're watching Firstpost. There's a lot lined up for you today, so let's get started. Now, the Cricket World Cup is entering the most anticipated phase, with the semi-finals just 2 weeks away. Before the Festival of Lights, or Diwali, in India sets the country alight, expect plenty of fireworks over the next 10 days as teams clamour for the top 4 spots. And with a certain fixture pre-decided for the semi-final, where team number 1 plays 4 and team placed second plays the third place team, all the squads have started making those calculations in their heads. What are the scenarios for the top teams and who are best placed to make it to that final 4? We'll tell you that, including some expert predictions. Saudi Arabia takes another massive leap for football. Is this going to be the best goal scored? As they continue to build their image as a sporting country in the world. And also lined up, why is the number 1 player in tennis upset? But before all that, let's take a quick look at all the headlines from the world of sports in Sports 360. World number two, Carlos Alcaraz was knocked out of the Paris Masters yesterday. Russia's Roman Saifulin beat Spain's Alcaraz 6-3, 6-4 in straight sets. Saifulin, who is ranked 45th in the world, will now advance to the round of 16. He will next play compatriot Karen Khachanov tomorrow. In football, 2 of Israel's upcoming Euro 2023 qualifying matches will be hosted by Hungary. The matches were set to be played in Israel but have been reassigned to Hungary due to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Israel's next 2 Euro 2024 qualifiers are against Switzerland and Romania later this month. And at the Cricket World Cup, Pakistan beat Bangladesh by 7 wickets in yesterday's match. Bangladesh batted first and faced a fiery pace attack from Shaheen Shah Afridi and Mohammad Wasim. They were bowled out for 204 runs in the 45th over. Then Pakistan began the run chase and their openers started off on a strong note. Pakistan chased down the score in the 32nd over with Fakhar Zaman and Abdullah Shafiq both scoring half-centuries. Meanwhile, 4 individuals were detained by police officials during the Pakistan-Bangladesh match. The matchgoers were arrested for allegedly waving Palestine flags inside the stadium. The detainees say they were protesting against the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. The Board for Cricket Control of India, or BCCI, has banned firework displays in Mumbai and New Delhi. The BCCI says that due to rising pollution in the 2 cities, there will be no fireworks post the World Cup matches at the Wankhede and Arun Jaitley stadiums. New Delhi will host 1 more match on November 6th, while Mumbai will host 2 matches on the 2nd and 7th of November. Additionally, of course, that one of the 2 semi-finals will also be played in Mumbai on the 15th of November. Air quality in both the cities remains in the very poor category. An Australian all-rounder Glenn Maxwell has suffered an injury during a golf-related incident. He's said to have fallen down from the back of a golf cart in the Indian city of Ahmedabad. Maxwell has suffered a concussion and will miss Australia's match against England on Saturday. Now, the Cricket World Cup is nearing its business end and there is a bit of a last-minute scramble to put the name on the flight to Kolkata and Mumbai for the semi-finals. And Pakistan's inspiring win last night against Bangladesh achieved 2 things. They ensured that they still have an outside chance of making it to the semi-final, and they knocked out Bangladesh from the tournament. So before we look at certain qualification scenarios and what some of the top teams need to do to keep their semi-finals dreams alive, we need to throw a glance at the points table. Now, India is at the top there with 12 points, and they would realize now that this is where things get a little tricky. They have looked flawless in the World Cup so far, and they wouldn't want anything upsetting their rhythm at this crucial juncture. South Africa, New Zealand and Australia very much in the hunt for the semi-final berths, but it gets interesting with Pakistan and Afghanistan still breathing down their necks. Of course, the bottom four teams there are undoubtedly Sri Lanka, Netherlands, Bangladesh and England. Now, the key is to, of course, reach 14 points, that glorious number that obviously assures you of that semi-final berth. But getting there could prove to be tricky for some of the teams. Let's look at India first. Now, they look like the most comfortably placed side and the most impressive one in the World Cup by a mile. And with their next match against a team like Sri Lanka, with only one win away from sealing a semi-final spot, even though their challenge thereafter comes against South Africa, they will fancy their chances against Netherlands. So we have to look at Pakistan next, because their chances of qualifying for the top four rests a lot with India winning. Shaheen Shah Afridi is miraculously sitting at the top of the wicket-taker list despite having a very average tournament. And after the performance last night, and with the wave of fan support and sympathy coming for Babar Azam and his company, there seems to be a rejuvenated feel about this mercurial team. The rivalry will be kept aside as they will pray for India to keep its winning momentum going. But first, they will have to close out the remaining two matches they have lined up. And those are big encounters against New Zealand and a hurting England. That will get them 10 points, which ensures a shot at going through, but only if other teams stay at the same points or lesser. And we're talking about Kiwis and the Aussies here, who are ahead of Pakistan. So let's go across to those teams. Australia is looking solid all of a sudden. They have peaked at the right moment. Their lead spinner, Adam Zampa, sharing the top spot in the wicket-taker list with Shaheen Shah Afridi at 16 is key to their success. David Warner finally getting into the runs. So too Glenn Maxwell and Travis Head. Tonking 100 on return from injury has just meant that this Australian side is beginning to look like the dangerous one we know them to be. They enjoy playing under pressure, so they will look to get as close to the magic 14-figure mark as they can, which would mean wins against England, Afghanistan and Bangladesh. That would get them to 14. Now, speaking of New Zealand, they started off strong and though are still looking like a well-oiled machine, coming close to that massive run chase against the Aussies and faltering, the losses in the last few ought to hurt. This match today, of course, is critical, and some other teams will surely be cheering them on silently, because a win by the Kiwis keeps the equation open for another semi-final spot. And of course, holds off the red-hot South Africa that is in the second position for some more time. New Zealand next plays Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So while they need the wins to solidify their spot, they will also be keeping an eye out on the net run rate. I'll tell you why in just a bit. Moving on to Afghanistan, did you think that we would be discussing the possibility of this side being in contention for a top 4 spot? And deservedly so, going by the way they have performed against top teams in this tournament. Their batting has come of age and their bowling has backed them up nicely. Though they are sitting at 6 points, they will fancy their chances much like Pakistan, as both are in the very same boat. They will have to push to the magic number of 10. What are the matches coming up for them? Netherlands, a battle of the teams who have changed this World Cup around. And one match, Afghanistan will look to win and win big. And that's followed by 2 tough ones against Australia and South Africa, which leaves us with South Africa, who's looking like a gun side, with talks of a positive environment, teammates gelling together and having fun, and both departments, in fact all of the departments, firing. This is one team to watch out for. That is, if they manage to keep their cold feet that usually creeps up at the semi-finals at arm's length. With matches against India and Afghanistan coming up, they will want to make sure their qualification is not left till the very last moment for this very reason. Now, we caught up with some experts during the tournament at various stages to ask them their top 4 picks. Take a listen.
I got this question a couple of times in the lead up to the tournament. I think India at home are always difficult. England still my favourites. I think they have revolutionised the 50-over game and teams are now starting to catch up, but they are the pioneers of the way the game is now being played. Australia is always a threat in World Cups. And my head says Pakistan. I think they're good enough, but the heart says South Africa.
I think so far some of the great sides have shown us that sport is something which teaches us something new. I'm talking about Australia. I'm talking about someone like South Africa, Australia. They still trying to find their combination to make sure that they're back in action. Last game they won, but they're still trying to find themselves out. Same way, if you look at South Africa, they did fabulous job. They were really prepared for the subcontinent wickets. The way they played, the way they understood the conditions and used the ground to their advantage. I really like the way they have come so far. Saying that Afghanistan, they have been brilliant. The way they played, and everybody who's been following, it's been outstanding. Saying that yes, India has done well. I don't want to talk too much about India because I'm really, really hoping that they reach the semi-finals and from there on they go on to the final stage.
We know now that it's not easy for everyone to get the 7 wins. The 7 wins that guarantee you a place, in the team. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how India go. They look like a form team at the moment. Playing really well at home, and they look like the team out of everyone that's the most difficult to beat. So it'll be interesting to see how they progress through the tournament.
All right, I spoke about the magical number 10 on the points column. Why is that number crucial? With teams like England, Bangladesh, and a couple of others who form the bottom half of the points table, there is always a chance of them spoiling the party for certain sides placed at the top half, who are desperately looking for that one win to seal things for them. And with that possibility very much on the cards, there may come a situation where we could find 3 or more teams tied with 10 points, which may mean a battle of the net run rate. So the voice of reason at this race for the semi-finals: win, and win big. Now, the spectacle of the Men's Football World Cup is returning to Asia. Saudi Arabia will host the FIFA Men's World Cup in the year 2034. Now, this has been confirmed by FIFA head Gianni Infantino. And the manner in which Saudi Arabia won the hosting rights has caught everyone by surprise. Australia was also contesting to host the World Cup, but then they backed out, leaving Saudi Arabia as the only bidder. A no-brainer then, a no-brainer decision for FIFA. In fact, even the Australians are in support of Saudi Arabia hosting the World Cup. Listen to this.
Look, we're very happy that the 2034 World Cup will come to the Asia region. That's important to us. We want to see more competitions in this part of the world. There's still a few hours. We know that Saudi are bidding. If Saudi are the bid that goes through, of course, we'll be supporting Saudi Arabia. But most importantly, we're very happy that the 2034 World Cup will come to Asia.
Now, for those who have been following developments in the world of football, Saudi Arabia hosting the World Cup may not come as a surprise. The sport has seen a massive jump in interest in West Asia. It all started when big names made their move to play football in Asia. It was Cristiano Ronaldo who started the trend, which is still continuing. Ronaldo moved to Saudi Pro League club Al Nassr in 2022, and he thinks that the future of football is in Saudi Arabia and West Asia. This year, Karim Benzema and Neymar were the 2 biggest names in football to sign up for Saudi clubs. But the craze for football reached multifolds when Qatar hosted the 2022 World Cup. It was a remarkable achievement for football in Asia. Qatar became the first West Asian nation to host the big tournament. Now, Saudi Arabia has the chance to make their own mark, and the people cannot control their excitement.
Now we have the ambition to host the World Cup. And we have seen the involvement in Saudi football and the whole sectors. We deserve this, and the success of the World Cup being hosted in Qatar gives us hope and a push to become the first place in the world in terms of hosting such events.
Clearly, the fans in Saudi Arabia feel they deserve to host the World Cup. The nation is booming with confidence. But there are a few things it must get in order to make this a successful execution. One of the biggest criticisms of Qatar hosting the World Cup was exploitation of labor. Workers from India, Nepal, Bangladesh and Pakistan were hired to build football stadiums. They were holed up in unsanitary accommodations and were forced to overwork without proper compensation. According to Qatari officials, between 400 to 500 of the migrant workers lost their lives in different projects related to the tournament. Nobody was held accountable, not one FIFA official was sacked, and Qatar basically washed their hands off without facing much backlash. And this wasn't it. Qatar was accused of imposing harsh restrictions and rules on fans and tourists. This included regulations on dressing, drinking, and even applying paint to the face. Any person seen wearing or supporting the LGBTQIA+ community was detained. Many of the fans who travelled to Qatar were upset, but FIFA backed Qatar and said that the host nation has the prerogative to implement rules and laws according to its culture. Qatar's hawkish handling of the Football World Cup have fans worried about the way Saudi Arabia will host the World Cup. Human rights organizations have already raised the red flag. They believe that Saudi Arabia will follow Qatar and disregard safety for workers.
There are a lot of very serious labor problems we already saw building the World Cup in Qatar that could be replicated, but on a scale of at least 6 times in Saudi Arabia. And that would be catastrophic for the migrant workers, for their families who would lose loved ones. And football players don't want to play the most important games of their lives in stadiums that workers died to build.
Harsh words that. And that's not it. Some are calling Saudi Arabia's hosting rights a catastrophe. They are worried that members of the LGBTQIA+ community will be targeted if they travel to Saudi for the World Cup. This could include fans, journalists, tourists, even players.
For more than a decade, the World Cups, which is the world's largest and most popular, beloved sporting events, have been staged in countries that don't have basic human rights protections. And that means protections for the migrant workers who are building the stadiums. It means protections for LGBT players, fans, journalists, and others. So it's a catastrophe for human rights if the World Cup goes to Saudi Arabia in 2034.
Saudi Arabia hasn't even begun preparations and they're already facing criticism. Now, we know that they take football and sports seriously, and the World Cup is a platform for them to show their progress as a society, a hub for the world to visit and revel at a massive sporting event. Saudi officials would have taken cues from the mistakes made by Qatar. Getting to host the Football World Cup is a spectacular opportunity to bring thousands of people together and celebrate the spirit of sports. And we think that is exactly what Saudi Arabia will be aiming to do. Now, today on Eye on Eves, we had to pay attention to the #1 tennis player in the world who came out making a strong statement. Aryna Sabalenka lashed out to show her utter disappointment at the manner in which the Women's Tennis Association was conducting the WTA Finals event in Mexico. Across the world, a similar careless approach to the organization of another women's global event ends in an embarrassing disaster, throwing sharp focus on the lack of efficiency when it comes to hosting women sporting events.
Imagine you're an elite-level sportsperson. You travel to a different country to compete at the highest of levels. But once you get there, you see that the grounds are unkempt and the organizers don't care about the sport at all. That's the kind of treatment the world's #1 ranked women's tennis player Aryna Sabalenka got. During the World Tennis Association or WTA Finals in Mexico, Sabalenka got a rude awakening. She was shocked to see the hastily built court that she was assigned to play on. Sabalenka took to Instagram to highlight the issue. I have to say that I'm very disappointed with the WTA and the experience so far at the WTA Finals. As a player, I feel disrespected by the WTA. I think most of us do. This is not the level of organization we expect for the finals. To be honest, I don't feel safe moving on this court a lot of the time. It wasn't just Sabalenka who was complaining. World #6 Marketa Vondrosova also showed solidarity with Sabalenka in criticizing the conditions of the court.
The court is honestly very bad. It's very crazy, you know, it like bounces everywhere, and I feel like it's almost like, I don't know, like bad clay or grass courts. It's not even hard court. So, and I'm not saying that because I lost, you know, I felt the same way at the practice also. So I don't think this court is very good for the WTA's finals, to be honest.
The matter got so serious that Sabalenka's arch-rival, world #2 Iga Świątek, almost kept the rivalry aside. But she didn't slam the organizers for the poor conditions and called it a challenge that all players faced.
Obviously, it's not a positive thing for any of us, but I think, the main thing is not focusing on that and just doing your job. Sometimes it bounces weirdly on clay or on grass as well. So I try to think, in that perspective and just do my job. And for sure it's not comfortable, and the fact that we also didn't have time to practice on this court, But at the end it doesn't really matter because all of us have the same court and the same conditions.
But here's where the issue lies. The WTA finals are being held in Mexico, and Cancun was confirmed as the host city only extremely late in September. That's too short a time to prepare clay tennis courts of world standing, and the women players had to suffer. Tennis isn't the only sport where organizers have taken women's sports for granted. Another recent incident from Chile shows that women's sporting events are not being taken seriously. This was at the Pan American Games that are currently being held in the South American nation of Chile. The women's 20-kilometer race had an embarrassing end because of the negligence of the organizers. Peru's Kimberly Garcia won the gold as she finished the race in 1 hour, 12 minutes and 26 seconds. This was declared as a new world record, until the organizers realized that they had royally messed up. The race, which was supposed to be 20 kilometers, was nearly 3 kilometers short. The matter became so big that the International Olympic Committee had to step in. And what was the result? Kimberly Garcia and the other podium finishers were allowed to keep the medals but were stripped of their finish times. Imagine the heartbreak the women athletes would have gone through. Women already face stigmas in their day-to-day lives, and when they take up sports, they face even more pushback. Things are certainly getting better. Participation of women in sports has increased. Fans too are celebrating this. The recent FIFA Women's World Cup broke all records for attendance. So clearly people want to see women play. But the organizers and sporting bodies need to take this seriously. They have a sluggish attitude when it comes to catering for women's sports. When the world #1 player has to complain about the venue, to call it unsafe, it tells a lot about the state of affairs. One of the easiest ways to overcome this would be to include more women at the table. Sporting bodies and organizers have largely been led and staffed by men. The inclusion of women will help in improving the standards. We're hopeful that the changes will come sooner than later.
We will come to the end of the show today, but we thought of bringing you something a little extra special on our last serve. Here's a woman defying all odds one can ever imagine. 16-year-old para-archer Sheetal Devi from India won a gold at the recently held Asian Games. Sheetal is the world's first armless female archer, and even that didn't stop her. After her win, she was greeted by India's Prime Minister and the Sports Minister, who made it a point to meet her in person.
Miss American armless archer, he's been advising her. I know her coaches have spoken back in India how much progress, rapid progress she's made.
देशवासियों की तरफ से भी
All right, that's all there is for us here today on First Sports. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this edition as much as we did bringing it to you. Take care. I'll see you again tomorrow.